The survey ship Aegis Dawn hung in orbit around a planet that shouldn't exist. Its sleek hull glimmered faintly under the cold light of distant stars, a lonely sentinel in the void. The crew stared at their monitors, faces pale with unease. "This can't be right," muttered Carter Haynes, the ship's lead navigator, his eyes darting over holographic displays. "There's nothing in the database, no record of this planet. It's completely uncharted." Commander Elena Vega leaned over his station, her brow furrowed. "Yet here it is," she said, her voice taut. Through the viewport, the planet loomed, a dark, brooding sphere with swirling black clouds that reflected no light. Its surface was obscured by a strange, iridescent haze that shimmered in unnatural colors. "What's that atmosphere made of?" "Readings are inconsistent," replied Dr. Ria Sato, the ship's exobiologist, from her console. "It's almost as if the elements are shifting. But one thing is certain. There's some kind of energy source down there." Elena frowned. "Natural or artificial?" "Artificial," Ria said after a pause, her voice heavy with dread. "And it's broadcasting a signal." That caught everyone's attention. A low hum reverberated through the ship, causing Elena's skin to prickle. The signal was faint at first, then grew louder as Ria tuned the ship's sensors. It wasn't just random noise. It was a rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. And then, clear as day, words emerged. "Help. Us." The bridge fell silent. "Is that human?" Carter asked, his voice shaking. How could anyone be broadcasting from down there? "We're light years from the nearest colony," Elena said. "No ships have ventured this far, not since the Dark Frontier Initiative was abandoned." "But the signal's not random," Ria insisted. "It's deliberate. And there's something embedded in it." "Coordinates," Elena's stomach tightened. "Coordinates for what?" Ria's screen flickered. "For something beneath the surface. It's buried deep." Before Elena could respond, the lights on the bridge dimmed and the signal pulsed louder. A chilling whisper echoed through the speakers. "Don't leave." Carter flinched. "Commander, this is insane. We don't even know what's down there." "That's the point," Elena said, masking her unease with a firm tone. "We're here to investigate anomalies, not run from them." "But it could be a trap," Carter argued. "This planet, it's wrong. You feel it too, don't you?" Elena didn't answer. She couldn't deny the growing sense of dread that clawed at her. The planet seemed to watch them, an unspoken malevolence radiating from its swirling haze. "Prepare the lander," she ordered. "We'll send an automated drone first. I want real-time visuals of what's down there." As the crew set to work, the signal shifted again. It wasn't a plea for help anymore. It was a warning. "Don't let it out." Elena's grip on the console tightened as a chill ran down her spine. Whatever lay beneath the surface of Planet X, it had been waiting. The drone's descent into the planet's atmosphere was tense, every second marked by the crew's sharp intakes of breath as the feed flickered across the bridge monitors. The drone penetrated the iridescent haze, and for a moment, the screen went dark. Then, it came alive with a surreal landscape. "What is this?" Ria murmured, leaning closer. The terrain was unlike anything they had seen before. Vast, jagged structures jutted from the ground, resembling crystalline spires, but they shifted and pulsed faintly as if alive. The surface glowed faintly in places, veins of bioluminescent light spidering across the landscape. Strange, undulating shapes moved in the distance, too far to identify. "Life forms," Ria whispered. "But they don't match anything in the database." The drone followed the embedded coordinates, its camera panning across the alien terrain. As it approached the location, the ground beneath it grew darker, the glowing veins fading into a black glass-like expanse. The signal's hum grew louder, vibrating through the ship as if resonating with the planet itself. "There," Carter said, pointing at the screen. The drone's camera focused on a massive structure rising from the ground, partially buried under layers of the black substance. It was a monolithic obelisk, smooth and seamless, with strange glyphs carved into its surface that pulsed faintly with light. "What is that?" Elena asked, her voice low. It's ancient, Rhea replied, her fingers flying over her console. But the material, it's not natural. It's emitting energy. Enough to broadcast the signal? Elena asked. More than enough, Rhea said grimly. It's like the entire structure is alive. As the drone approached the obelisk, the glyphs began to shift, rearranging themselves. The feed glitched, and for a moment, the screen displayed something impossible. A humanoid figure standing in the obelisk's shadow, its features obscured by static. Is that a person? Carter asked, his voice trembling. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. The glyphs flared brighter and the signal surged, deafening in its intensity. Help us! It boomed before cutting off entirely. The drone's feed turned to static. What just happened? Elena demanded. I've lost the drone, Carter said, frantically pressing buttons. It's gone. Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered. Alarms blared, and the lights dimmed again. The signal returned, louder than before, but this time it was accompanied by something else. A deep, resonant growl that seemed to come from the planet itself. Something's moving down there, Rhea said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's massive. The feed returned briefly, just long enough to show the obelisk cracking open, releasing a blinding light. Something emerged. A shifting, formless mass that seemed to ripple like liquid shadow. Its presence was overwhelming, even through the screen. Shut it down, Elena shouted. Cut the connection! But the image remained, seared into their monitors and their minds. The entity turned, and for a brief moment, its gaze seemed to meet Elena's. Don't let it out, the signal repeated, its tone desperate. Don't... The monitors went dark, leaving the crew in silence. Elena stood frozen, her pulse pounding in her ears. She finally turned to the crew. Prep the lander, she ordered. We're going down. The lander's engines roared as it broke through the iridescent haze, the crew bracing against the turbulence. Elena gripped her harness, her mind racing. The signal's warning echoed in her ears. Don't let it out. Through the lander's viewport, the alien landscape came into focus. The jagged crystalline spires shimmered faintly, and the bioluminescent veins seemed to pulse faster, as if responding to their descent. In the distance, the obelisk loomed, its fractured surface emanating a dull, ominous glow. Touchdown in 60 seconds, Carter reported from the pilot's seat. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled over the controls. Rhea stared at the obelisk through the viewport. That thing, it's not just a structure, it's a containment device. Containing what? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Rhea hesitated, then whispered, something old, something powerful. The lander touched down on the glass-like ground with a jolt. Outside, the terrain seemed to shimmer unnaturally, the air thick with an energy that made Elena's skin crawl. The crew donned their suits and disembarked, their boots crunching against the brittle surface. Keep your comms open, Elena ordered as they approached the obelisk. The glyphs on its surface shifted continuously, their patterns incomprehensible yet oddly mesmerizing. Commander, Rhea said, her voice tight. The energy levels here are spiking. This place is waking up. Elena stopped at the base of the obelisk, staring at the fractures spreading across its surface. The faint hum of the signal resonated in her chest, growing louder with each step. Help us, the signal whispered again. But this time it wasn't just a broadcast. It was a chorus of voices, layered and overlapping, pleading in unison. What are we doing here? Carter asked, his voice breaking. This is wrong. We shouldn't be here. Elena turned sharply. We need answers. If this thing is a threat, we need to understand it before it spreads. Rhea crouched near the obelisk, her scanner flashing red. It's destabilizing. The fractures are releasing something. As if on cue, the ground trembled, and a low, guttural roar reverberated through the air. The fractures widened, and a blinding light poured from within. The glyphs pulsed wildly and the obelisk began to shift, the smooth surface warping as if it were alive. Elena! Rhea shouted. It's opening! The crew stumbled back as the obelisk split apart, revealing a swirling vortex of shadows and light. From its depths emerged the formless mass they'd seen on the drone's feed, its liquid-like surface rippling with unnatural fluidity. The entity hovered before them, its presence overwhelming. It didn't have a face, but Elena felt its gaze pierce through her. Whispers filled the air, unintelligible and maddening, growing louder with each passing second. "Shut it down!" Elena yelled, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. "How?" Carter shouted, panic in his voice. Rhea pointed at a console embedded in the ground, half buried in the glass-like surface. "There! It's a fail-safe!" Elena sprinted toward it as the entity surged forward, its form stretching and twisting, tendrils lashing out. One struck the ground near her, shattering it like glass. "Elena, hurry!" Rhea screamed. Elena reached the console, her fingers fumbling over the alien interface. The glyphs on the console shifted, rearranging themselves as if testing her resolve. The whispers intensified, now forming coherent words. "Join us. Release us." "No," Elena growled, her hands trembling. "You're not getting out." She slammed her palm onto a glowing glyph and the console flared to life. The obelisk shuddered, its fractures sealing as the vortex began to collapse. The entity let out a deafening roar, its tendrils retracting as it was pulled back into the obelisk. The ground trembled violently and the light from the fractures faded. The obelisk's surface smoothed, the glyphs dimming to an inert state. Silence fell over the landscape. "Is it over?" Carter asked, his voice trembling. Elena stared at the now sealed obelisk, her chest heaving. "For now." But as they returned to the lander, the whispers returned, faint but unmistakable. "Thank you. For now." As the lander ascended into the haze, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they had encountered on Planet X wasn't done with them or humanity.